Hi everyone, today I'm going to be reviewing this gorgeous pearl sample underbust made by Retrofolie. And Retrofolie is a one-woman business run by Julianne in Montreal, Canada. So here's the front, the side, the back, and the other side. Because this corset was a sample, it was not made to measure for my body. If you were to order this corset, it would be made custom to your measurements. But for those who are curious about the measurements, the center front here is 10 3/4 inches. At the princess seam here, from the underbust to the top of the lap here, is just 8.5 inches. And 4.5 are from the waist up, while 4 inches are from the waist down. At the side seam here, it is 13 inches. And in the center back, it is just short of 12.5 inches. And for the circumferential measurements, the waist here closes at 22 inches. At the rib cage here, it's 28 inches, so it has a 6-inch rib spring, and the hip measures 32 inches, so it has a 10-inch hip spring. This corset is cut to be pointed in the center front here, so it's contoured under the bust, and in the center front at the bottom here, it is very, very gently rounded, but it's actually mostly straight. And then it comes down longer over the side of the hip, and you can actually see in the back, it comes a little bit back up again at the bottom edge here. As you'll see in a couple of minutes when I go to the tabletop portion of this review, the pearl corset features this really beautiful painting of the birth of Venus on a sort of chiffon fabric. So it's not printed cotton, it's a much softer, more lightweight type of fabric. So the birth of Venus was painted in 1863, so it's now part of the public domain, and it was painted by Alexandre Cabanel. Now let's go to the tabletop portion of this review so I can show you the other gorgeous details of this corset close-up. So here is the beautiful pearl corset laid flat, and for the materials, the fashion fabric is a printed chiffon. Like I mentioned before, this is the birth of Venus from 1863, and this was printed on just a very lightweight single piece of chiffon. So right here from this side seam over to this side seam, that's a single layer, and you can see that this is another layer that's just been pleated and draped over. And then it has an interlining strength fabric of couture, and right here you can see the lining, which is a lightweight blue cotton. And this is what the Retrofolie label looks like. So what's nice about it is not sewn on, and it doesn't have any sharp or itchy edges. It's actually ironed on, and it's actually right in the center front here on the inside. So even though the entire corset is essentially wrapped in, say, 3 pieces of fashion fabric, like that's one, that's one, that's one. If you take a peek at the inside here, you'll see that it's actually a 7-panel pattern, 13 panels total, because Julianne had essentially made that one on a fold in the center front there. This corset does not like to lie on its side whatsoever, but the first 3 panels, which I don't know if you're able to see like very faintly through the chiffon, they are relatively straight, a little bit tapered towards the lower tummy. And then panels 4 and 5 are what create most of this swell over the hip here. And then 6 and 7 create most of this curve in the upper back. And when I feel the stitches underneath here, the panels themselves are very, very smooth. I can tell that the seam allowances were pressed open and then stitched down on both sides. So this might have been done with the sandwich method. So feeling through the lining, I know that separate boning channels were laid down on the underside of the strength fabric, but you can't see it because Julianne had used a floating lining here, and obviously the fashion fabric is floating as well. And I can see and feel a faint outline of the waist tape on the inside here. So it's invisibly stitched between the layers. It's covered by the floating lining here. It's 1 inch wide, and it runs through the entire width of the corset from the center back all the way around to the center back on the other side. And here's a close-up of the binding. It's made from bias strips of the matching printed chiffon. It's machine stitched on both outside and inside. And so you can see that she's stitched in the ditch on the outside, and on the underside you can see that there is that little necessary seam allowance. And because this corset was a sample, it did not come with a Modesty panel. However, I have commissioned Retrofolie in the past, and I was able to get a floating stiffened Modesty panel on my corsets, so that might be an option for you if you were to commission a custom corset. And obviously, because this is a closed front corset, there is no busk and no Modesty placket. And obviously, because the boning channels are not really visible on the outside or on the inside, I kind of had to go more by feel than anything else. And I think this corset has a total of 22 steel bones, 11 on each side. So in the center front here, it has 2 flat steel bones, about 1/4 inch wide. And you can see that this attracts my magnet. And then between the first and second panels is another double boning channel. These are spirals. Between the second and third panel is 1 spiral steel bone, and this one also 1 spiral steel bone. The side seam here has 2 spiral steels to go over that curve of the hip. Near the back here, another single bone. Between panels 6 and 7, another single bone, and of course, sandwiching the grommets in the back are 2 1/4 inch wide flat steel bones. And so it's the same on the other side for a total of 22. And here's a close-up of the grommets. There are a total of 24 of them, 12 on each side. They are size 00 with a medium to large flange around them and finished in silver. They are all equidistantly spaced and they're all holding in very well. And it's a little bit difficult to see the inside here because it is a closed corset, but nice big washers. I recognize these grommets as being very similar or the same as the grommets that many North American, like American and Canadian corset makers tend to use. They have all seemed to roll really nicely. I don't see any splits in them and they don't catch on the laces, and you can see that they're all holding in fairly well. And the laces in the back here, Julianne chose to lace it with this lovely lavender ribbon. So this is about 5/8 inch wide, very, very long because you need to open up the corset quite wide to be able to either slip it over your head or pull it up from your hips since it has a closed front. It glides well through the grommets. It doesn't catch on any splits. There's absolutely no stretch to this whatsoever. Ribbon has a tendency to lie relatively flat, so it can be less bulky compared to, say, round cord. And the ribbon holds the knots and the bows pretty well. It does have a tendency to slip because the ribbon is so smooth, but as long as you know how to tie knots and bows properly and not, say, a granny bow, then it shouldn't come loose on you over time. While this particular corset I'm wearing was a sample that was sold at a bit of a discount, if you were to commission this corset new from Retrofolie, it would be completely bespoke, made to measure for your body, and it would start at $400 US. So this concludes my review of the Pearl Underbust corset made by Retrofolie. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. If you did, please remember to click that like button down there as it helps support this channel. If you have any comments or questions about this corset or Retrofolie in general, feel free to leave your comment down below and I'd be happy to get back to you. Or if I don't know the answer, I'd be happy to forward your questions over to Julianne. And once again, I have to thank my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If it were not for the support of my patrons, I would not be able to continue making these free videos to study and to share all the information about the beautiful variety of corsets that are available out there. So thanks to each and every last one of my patrons. And if you would like to learn more about becoming a patron on Patreon, I'll put a link down in the description below as well as on the screen here. My patrons not only get to vote on where their money is spent, so you get to vote on what brands of corsets I buy for future reviews, as well as what topics of non-review videos I make in the future. And my patrons also get first dibs to my sample sales when I sell off parts of my own collection, as well as exclusive shop discounts. Thank you again, and I will see you all next week for another video. Bye.